Welcome to Finding Elusive Records. I'm Robert Kehrer, the Senior Product Manager of all of the search and hinting technologies at FamilySearch, and I hope this presentation will allow you to identify your ancestors' records that have been difficult to find in the past. Our agenda today is to talk about a number of different techniques for working with unindexed image sets, navigating waypoints, using indices that are present in those, and how to attach those images to Family Tree. We'll also talk about some of the more advanced features built into the FamilySearch search system that you may not have been aware of. Why should you care about unindexed images? Well, the reality is that on FamilySearch.org, the 5.66 billion records that are currently published today represent only about 30% of the data available on the website. The other 70% of the ancestor data that we have published is in the form of digital images that have not been indexed and therefore not searchable or hintable. What we've provided is a digital microfilm experience, and the bulk of this presentation will show you how to make use of those images. The first thing, we'll start with a simple one, which is navigating image waypoints. And the question is, what are waypoints? Why should I care about them? Well, when you have 1,000,000 images, that's a lot of images to look through. So our teams have broken those images into logical chunks. And just like as you're driving down the freeway, you can tell where you are by looking at the mile markers or the names of the towns as they go by. In the image sets, you can tell where you are because the images are broken down by year or other ways. They let you drill down into a very large set of images, ignoring all of the ones that are not of interest to you. Usually, these waypoints define the images based on where they're from, what kind of images they are, or when they were created. Let's take a quick example and look for the World War II draft registration for James Bedford Mahaffey, who I happen to know was from Virginia. This is the main search page at FamilySearch, and as we go through the presentation, you'll notice the red highlighting. We don't use a lot of red on the website, and I've introduced that into the presentation to draw your eye that way. One way that I can find that World War II draft registration for James is to drill down into all of the published collections. I'm going to click on the Browse All Published Collections link, which takes me to a page where I get a list of all of the 2,194 collections of records that are currently published on FamilySearch. I can see which collections have images. If the camera icon looks like this, the images are on FamilySearch. If it has a little web page behind it, it means the images are on another website. You'll notice that I'm told how many records, indexed records, are in each set. And for those that have no indexed records, it just simply says Browse Images. I can tell when the collection was last published, and a little known fact is that these column headers are actually clickable, and if I click records, it will resort this, putting the ones with the most records at the top. I also have the ability to filter through, because scrolling through 2,194 collections is quite tedious. I can filter those collections down by place, date, type of collection, etc. I'm going to click on the Browse Images link. I find that the most important tool in getting to the collections most interesting to me is the filter by collection name. And so if I put in World War II, it instantly filters those 2,000 collections down to just the 7 that match what I typed in. Now you'll notice there's 2 collections with images for World War II draft registration cards in 1942. One of those collections has 11 million records, the other one just says Browse Images. I'm going to assume that I've already looked for James Mahaffey by doing a search, and that's the logical thing to do. If he was in there, that's where the easiest way to find him. But I didn't find him in that. So my next step is to click the Browse Images link. Every one of the 2,000 collections has a collection details page that defines the collection, gives you a description, gives you a citation. If it were indexed, there'd be a search form here, but in this case it's not, so I just have a link to 11 million images. There's also a Learn More link. If I want to know more about this collection, click that link. It'll take you over to the wiki and you'll learn how to use it, what data is in this collection, and how it was gathered, and a lot of other information. When I click the Browse through 11 million images, It brings me into what we call waypoints. We've taken that entire set of 11 million images and broke it down by state. In some cases, like New York, where we had lots of images within the state, we broke it down into sub-jurisdictions beyond that. Now, James was from Virginia, so I'm going to click Virginia. Virginia has been broken down by the first letter of the serviceman's surname. And I'm looking for James Mahaffey, so I'm going to click the M down here. And in this collection, they've gone through and done a light indexing on the name of the serviceman. So when I click the M, I can look on this page and I see James Bedford Mahaffey. Now when I click his name, it takes me directly to the record. Again, there's no indexed data, so what I'm looking at here is the image. When I click on James Bedford Mahaffey's name, it takes me to the image of that record, that registration card, and I can see all the data that's on that. Now, I'm often asked, what are waypoints? What kind of waypoints will I find in a collection? And the answer is I really can't tell you. Our teams break these down by whatever information is available on that collection. Sometimes it's county, sometimes it's city, it might be by record type. As we saw, it could be the letter of a surname or name ranges, a year. If it's a legal document, it might be by case number. The diversity in the types of waypoints is great, and it's always unique to the collection and the record set. All right, let's go a little bit harder. Let's use indices that are present in the image sets. Now, people say, I thought you said these were unindexed images. And indeed they are. No one has sat down and typed in all of the data that's on the image in a way that it can be searched for. However, the people who create the images often will create a summary of the work that they did or the ordinances that they recorded. When we find those manually created indexes inside of the record books, we photograph those as well, and they can be very helpful in helping you jump quickly to specific pages in the document. Let's take a very quick task to demonstrate this. I'm going to look for the baptismal record for Rufio Antonio. He was born in early 1801 in the Santa Adira parish of Catania, Italy. The first thing I do is I'm going to look at his person page in the family tree, and I notice that there's no record hints. I'm going to look through and do searches on the various websites because I certainly want to use all of the indexed records first. And when I run out of indexed records and I haven't found what I'm looking for, the next thing I'm going to go is into the unindexed image sets. Last time we clicked on this Browse All Published Collections. This time I'm going to go in through the map. So I've clicked on Europe, and I'm presented with a list of all the countries in Europe. Clicking Italy takes me to the Italy page. Now I can see at the top here, there's a search form for Italy, but I've already done searching for Rufio and didn't find anything. So down below the search form, there's a set of collections that are unindexed. And looking at those collections, I noticed that there is an Italy, Catania, Archdiocese of Catania Catholic Church records covering 1515 to 1941, which covers the date range of 1801 that I'm looking for. And I can see that this collection has 1.7 million images, which is a lot to look through. When I click on that collection, again, I'm taken to the record, our collection details page. First thing I might want to do is click that Learn More link to get myself familiar with this collection. But I'm going to jump right into the 1.7 million images by clicking the link there to browse through those images. And it takes me into the waypoints as we saw. I see that there's the Comune Frazione. A little searching tells me that's a jurisdictional level inside of the Catholic Church, kind of analogous to maybe an LDS stake. And I'm looking for the Catania commune. Inside of that is the parish, and there's the Santa Adira parish. It lists all of the parishes inside of Catania. Clicking on Santa Adira, I can see that the records are baptism types, and they cover 1797 to 1888 in this particular parish. That's a 91-year range for those images. When I click in to see those images, I see that there's 2,721 of them. So now I have to do a little bit of math. If I have 2,700 images covering 91 years, that's about 30 images per year. It starts in 1797, but I'm looking for 1801, which is 4 years into the image set. That means, assuming about 30 images per year, 1801 probably starts about image 120. That's the best place for me to begin looking for 1801. Now, given that quick and dirty math, am I guaranteed that the year 1801 records start at image 120? No. I'm going to jump that far in, but I may have to use these tools, the backward and forward and putting in image numbers, and jump around a little bit until I find the exact image that has the records for 1801. And doing that, I find that the records for the year 1801 are on image 79. Now, this is an index by name. It says index nominum in Latin, and as I scroll down that page, I can see an entry here for Antonius Rufio. The Catholic priest wrote this in Latin. I had to do a little poking around. There's a figure here, the number 9 and 38, and with a little bit of research or poking around in the images, I had learned that this is page 9, ordinance 38. So now I need to go back, because this is the index. It wasn't uncommon for a Catholic priest to record his ordinances throughout the year, and then on the last day of the year, he would allocate some pages, build a manual index of all of the ordinances that he did throughout the year before he started in on the ordinances for the coming year. So I need to go back in the image set a certain number of images to find page 9, ordinance 38. And by jumping back to image 70, I can see the page numbers there at the top, page 8 on one side, page 9. And then down the page, I can see the ordinance numbers, 35, 36, 37. And by scrolling down a little bit, I can see ordinance 38. Zooming in on that, I see that it's 10th of February. I see baptizery, I don't speak Latin, infantum, and I see his name, Antonio Rufio. So that is the record of his baptism. I could transcribe that. I could translate it from Latin if I wished. But my next step is, having found his record, is I want to attach this record to Rufio in the family tree back on his person page. And the way that I do that is by clicking this blue button up in the top right, attached to family tree. When I do that, the image slides to the left, a panel comes in on the right. It allows me to create the source, give it a title. A title is put in there and some dummy text, and I'm going to change that to Baptism of Rufio Antonio, and I put in some information in the notes about what I learned in the record. And then at the bottom it says Next, select person. This is where I get to tell the system who in the family tree this source should be attached to. On the second pane, it gives me my history list. For those of you who know what a family tree history list is, it's a list of the last 50 people that I touched or visited in the family tree. If I click that, it drops down and shows me the last people I visited, and Rufio happens to be the one that I visited last because we were just on his page. If the person I need is not present in my history list, I can enter the person ID in this box and click the arrow, and it will load that person from the family tree. Okay, so I choose Antonio, or Rufio Antonio, and it shows me a check mark there. It also went and looked in the tree for his spouse, children, parents, and siblings, and since he didn't have any, it didn't bring any in. We'll see in a future example where it brings in people from the family tree who are also in the record, and I can select those. In this case, I've selected Rufio, I've added some notes, and I'm going to click Next. It adds that source to him. Then going back to his person page and scrolling down to the sources section, I can see the source that I just added, which is the Baptism of Rufio Antonio. It has the link down here. It has the title I gave it, the notes that I added, and anyone who visits Rufio in the family tree can click that link and go right back to the record and see what I was seeing. Now, that was a case where the images were in the image set created by the person who made the images. Let's look at a different set where the indexes are created from the image sets after the fact. Someone found the records at some point in the past and built an index in a separate book. When we go into an archive and look for documents, sometimes we find a separate book that contains information about one of the sets of images in that archive. People who curate the record often create these indices in separate books, and when we find that, we photograph those as well. Let's do a quick example of what it looks like to use an image index that is found in a separate volume or a separate set of images. I'm going to use the task of looking for the marriage record for Thomas Dutton and Mary Cobb in Woodstock, Vermont. Now, I'm going to go to Mary's page. I notice right off in the record hints, because that's the lowest hanging fruit for me, I always look at record hints, that there's some vital records. It says Mary Cobb vital records, and that could be birth, marriage, death. Clicking on it, it pops open the record, and I see right off that this is Vermont Vitals. It has Thomas Dutton in here, has Mary Cobb, that the event type is marriage. So I was looking for a marriage record for Thomas and Mary, and the record hinting system found one for me, which is awesome. Now, I like to look at the images to validate anything that's found, make sure the data is accurate, and understand what I'm really looking at. There's always a view image link if an image is available, so I'm going to go ahead and click that link. It pops open the image right there for me to look at, and I see February 22nd. That's awesome. 1824. The town is Woodstock. It tells me the town clerk. I have great information here, but I also noticed something. This doesn't look like a record created in 1824. This looks kind of like a Rolodex card with this hole in the bottom and printed data here, and I'm thinking this was created after the fact. The genealogist in me tells me that records created at the time of the event are more powerful and authoritative in defining the data on that event, and so I'm really not satisfied. I found this thing created after the fact, but I'd really like to go find the actual marriage record. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the search page. Now, we used the map in the last example. In a prior example, we clicked Browse All Published. But just down below Find a Collection, there's actually a data entry field. Now, if I just type Vermont, right there in place, it gives me lists of collections that matched what I typed in. And as I look over that list, this one here, Vermont Town and Vital Town Records, looks like an awesome one. That's a great place to look for a marriage record, and it covers the year 1824 that I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. It takes me to the collection details page. The first thing I should always do is do a search for Thomas Dutton. So I'm going to do that search. I didn't find anything. And so my next step is to go browse through these images. And I can see there's 1.3 million images, which is a lot, but fortunately it's broken down again, so I don't have to look through all of them. I'm looking for Woodstock, Vermont, and I've kind of reached an impasse. It's giving me a county, but I don't know which county Woodstock is in. Fortunately, someone created a really cool tool called Google. And if I do a quick search in Google, I can find that the town of Woodstock, Vermont is in the county of Windsor. So if I click on Windsor, I'm taken to a list of all the towns in Windsor County, and Woodstock is one of those. And if I click on Woodstock, I can see that the records for that town are broken down by event type, births, deaths, marriages, etc. But I'm a little bit confounded because I have two sets of images that cover the year 1824. The first one, births, marriages, deaths, in what's called Volume A. And then I have this other one, marriages, that's in Volume 1. And I guess I could look through both of those and hope that I find it, but those could be a lot of images. More useful to me is this index. It says index to marriages and covers the year range covering 1824. So I'm going to click on that. The first rule of working with an image index is to define how the records were indexed. Sometimes it's by date, sometimes it's by event type, it might be by surname. So I'm going to skip past these initial images because these are just the bookkeeping images that FamilySearch adds to define what you're looking at and keep ourselves honest. And I'm going to click on one of these first images just to open it up and see how things are organized. And I can see that it looks like they're organized alphabetically by the surname of the groom. This column over here looks like the name of the bride, that the volume number and page number, which is what I really need out of the index, is present there. And in scrolling down and looking at these, I can see Thomas Dutton and Mary Cobb. There's the February 1824 marriage, and it tells me that I should be looking in volume 1, page 16. That's the key information that I need. And if I go back in the waypoints, I now know which of these two to use. I'm going to dive into volume 1, and I'm looking for page 16. Clicking that brings me back into the image sets. I could put 16 in here and jump forward, but you have to remember image 16 and page 16 are not the same thing, because we have all of these bookkeeping images up at the front. And so where this might be page 1 and 2 is actually image 4. The page numbers and image numbers don't always match. So I'm going to have to poke around a little bit, and I find that it's actually image 33 that has page 16 in the book. And looking a little closer, I can see there's Eli Dunham, Town Clerk, State of Vermont, Windsor County. Be it remembered that at Woodstock in said county on the 22nd day of February. This is awesome. That is the original marriage record for Thomas and Mary Cobb. So my next step, now that I found their marriage record, is I want to attach this record to them as a source, documenting a key piece of their life, and I want to attach it to them in the family tree. So I'm going to use that button at the top again, attach to family tree. When I click that, the image slides to the side. A new panel comes in that invites me to create a source. I can give it a title, change that to Marriage of Thomas and Mary Dutton. Now in this case, I can read this. It's not Latin like the last example. And so I'm just going to type in Eli Dunham, Town Clerk, be it remembered. I can type the whole thing in if I want. And when I'm done, I click Next, Select Person. Again, I'm presented with my history list. And because I visited, when I click that, because I visited Thomas Dutton recently in the tree and Mary Cobb, they both show up in my history list. I'm just going to click Thomas. It retrieves him from the tree, but it also looks and says we find his spouse and his children in the tree. And it turns out that Mary Cobb is mentioned in this record. So I'm going to go ahead and click on her as well and add her to this. That tells the system I want to attach this document, this image, to both Thomas and to Mary. Next, I click Next at the bottom, and it gives me an opportunity to provide my reason. A lot of times people ask, what should I put in that reason statement? And the answer is, you want to put the kind of reasoning you went through that caused you to believe that this record really pertained to those real historical people. And in this case, the names, the dates, the relationships and places, they all match what's documented in Family Tree from other records. And that's a fine reason statement. Then I'm going to click Attach at the bottom. And I can go back to Mary's page. I can scroll down to the Sources section, and I see the record that I just added has been added as a source with the title I gave, links to the image. It's also added to Thomas in the family tree too. Let's move on. One thing people don't realize is that a lot of images on FamilySearch have not been broken down into image sets yet. There's a great number of images that are not grouped into collections. Our capacity for acquiring images and making them available on the website is greater than our ability to index them. It's also greater than our ability to group them into collections and add waypoints. There's an awful lot of images, and a growing number, that are only available through the FamilySearch Catalog. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about how to use that. To do that, let's look for a probate record for John S. Powell. Now, I know John lived in Berrien County, Michigan, and he died in the year 1893, but I want the probate record. To do this, I'm going to go first to his page in the tree. I'm going to do this looking for record hints. I'm going to look and search all the websites, use all the index records. I didn't find any probate records. I'm going to use the tools that we just talked about and look in the collections and in image sets and indices or anything that I can. But if I come up empty, I'm not done yet. I can still go to the FamilySearch Catalog. The FamilySearch Catalog is a resource very much like you would find in any public library. It lists all of the holdings of FamilySearch that we've gathered over the last 150 plus years. It has maps, it has online and offline collections and books and magazines and microfilm and tremendous amount of resources there. I'm going to put in a place search for Berrien, Michigan, and it looks in the catalog and gives me all of the places that match what I typed in. I'm going to choose the top one, United States, State of Michigan, County of Berrien. And when I do that search, it brings back a list of all the types of things found in our holdings from Berrien County. There's bibliographies and biographies and censuses and church records and genealogies and land and property records and maps. Scrolling down on that list, though, I can see that there are 2 titles for probate records from the County of Berrien, and this first one catches my interest. I'm going to go take a look at that one. So I click that title, and I'm presented with kind of what I would expect in a library catalog. It's a title details page. It's going to tell me the format, the authors, the call numbers. It's going to have notes and all the other information about this particular title. Scrolling down, though, is where it gets interesting because I see that this title is actually available digitally online because these camera icons are here. And they're broken up into estate files. Well, I'm kind of at a loss because I'm looking for John S. Powell, and I know the year, but I have no idea what estate file number has his probate in it, if it's even here. Fortunately, at the very top, I see that there's an index, and I'm hoping that will tell me what the estate file number is. So I'm going to click the little camera icon here. And again, what's the first thing you need to do when you're using an index? Get past the bookkeeping images, jump into one of the first images, and look to see how it's organized. By looking at one of the first images here, I can see that it's organized alphabetically by surname. What that tells me is that if I go back to these image sets, I can scroll up on this, and every once in a while I'm going to look and see, am I getting closer to the surname starts with P? As I scroll up and double click on these thumbnails, eventually I get to the P.O. and I can see John Powell right there. Now the key information that I need is actually this file number. What that's telling me is that John's probate is in this set of images, which I'm rejoicing right now, and that to find it I need this file number 1302. Okay, so armed with that, I can then go back to the set of images and I can scroll down, way down, until I find the set of images that contain probate estate file 1302. Again, clicking the camera icon, it's going to take me into the sets of images. And looking it over, and you always should become familiar with how image sets are organized. They're all going to be organized differently. I noticed that periodically there's 2 blank images with a little bit of writing on the top. That piques my interest, so I click on it, and I find that the first of those blank images has the name of a person at the top, and the second of the blank images has a file number. So what that tells me is that I should be scrolling through these sets of thumbnails, and then wherever I see 2 blank images together, I'm going to click on it, open it up, and see if I'm getting closer to file number 1302. There's a lot of images here. There's 3,200 of them, but I can jump past large numbers of images just looking for these blank files. In other collections, you'll find that there's other visual cues for how the images are organized, so it behooves you to become familiar with how an image set is organized. As I scroll through and I look at this, I find that image 2486, I found the blank images. I open it up. The first one has John S. Powell. The second has his file number 1302. And as I go and look at these images, I can see this is his probate. I, John S. Powell, of the city of Hoopeston in the county of Vermillion, in the state of Illinois of the age of 48, and it goes on and on. In fact, the next 78 images are all pertain to this one probate file. Do I need to attach each one of those 78 images individually? And the answer is no. If I attach the first of those images, anyone who follows in my footsteps can jump to the first image and then use the next image button to go look at all 78 of those. The first thing I want to do is attach this. So I'm going to attach the first one just like we did before. I click the blue button, the panel comes in. I type in probate for John S. Powell. I make a note in here that the next 78 images represent the probate. I click next, and it brings me my history list. John is in my history list, so I select him. As I read the probate, I noticed that it referenced his two sons, Drayton and Robert. And so when I chose John, the system went and looked for his spouse and his children. His spouse wasn't there, but his children were. And I clicked the button next to Drayton and Robert because this probate tells me about them, where they were living, justifies his relationship to them. So even though it's John's probate record, it gives me meaningful information about his sons. So I want to attach his probate to his sons as well. Then I'm going to click the next button. I can add in a reason statement why I'm attaching this. In this case, the names, dates, places, relationships are validate what is already known. And I'm going to click attach. Going back to his page in the family tree, I can scroll down and look at those sources section, and there's the probate record that I just added. This same record, if I went to Drayton's page or Robert's page, would be present there. So what we just did is we went to the catalog, we found a set of images looking for all of the records in a place, found a set of images that pertained to the type of record we were looking for. We used an index to find out how to navigate those image sets, jumped to the file number, found the record, and added it to the right people in the family tree. All right, let's do something else. This is using the batch number. This is kind of an advanced concept, but people ask, what is a batch number? Well, it turns out when we send people into an archive to acquire images, we over the years used an internal number to keep track of those images to help us organize the work internally at FamilySearch. People figured out really quick that those batch numbers that FamilySearch was kind of secretly assigning really represented a place and a type of record. And so they started building lists that this batch number represents marriage records from this place, this parish, etc. And it turns out that ends up being very useful. Genealogists are very clever, and they figured that if we search on these batch numbers repeatedly, we can reconstitute families based on the principle that families often lived in the same parish for multiple generations. Let's go do this. I have a Mary Leah. She's from Shropshire, England. And I want to find her, her father, her grandfather, and reconstitute her family as much as possible. So to do that, I'm going to do a search. It's the logical first thing to do. I put in Mary Leah. I put in her birthplace, Milbrae, Shropshire. I put in a date range that covers the year she was born. And I told the system I only want records of type birth or birth-like. Doing that search, I get back about 80 results, but I'm really pleased that the first one is actually her. I see Mary Leah. It has her birth date, her place, and her father and mother's name. Opening that record, and I hope everyone knows you can just click on this row and we will open up the record in place. I can see all the information there, but there's this number on the side, indexing project batch number. That number right there is a critical piece of information that allows me to do this repeated batch searching. Taking that P016071 tells me a lot about this set of images. If you want to know what the P batch number is, go to the FamilySearch wiki. The letter preceding the batch number designates what kind of record it is, and P means birth records, M means marriage records, and so you'll learn that in the wiki page. But So if I take 16071, P meaning christening, M meaning marriage, I can then put in some information that I found in Mary's tree. From the birth record, I learned that her father is Thomas, her mother is Jane, and she was born in November 1802, which leads me to the next question that I want to ask. What's Jane's maiden name? And when was Thomas and Jane married? Well, to do that, I have enough information. All I have to do is change the P at the beginning of the batch number to an M and put in some different information on the form. Let's go right back to where we were. This is the search we did for Mary's birth record, and I'm going to alter some of the data on the form here on the left-hand side. I'm going to change the name to Thomas Leah. I'm going to put in a spouse's name of Jane. Notice I use that same batch number, but I put an M for marriage records. So what I'm really doing is I'm telling the system I want to search just in this parish, but I want to find all the records where the spouse is Thomas and Jane. And when I do that and click search or update, it brings back one record, which is awesome. Opening that up, I can see that Jane's maiden name was Yeastrop, and they were married on the 1st of June, 1789. So I can go add that to my records, when they were married and what her name is, which brings me to the next question. Can I go find Thomas's birth record? Because that'll tell me who his parents are and when he was born. Well, indeed I can. I'm going to go back. I'm going to put Thomas Leah. I've closed down the spouse. I've changed the batch number back to a P, and I did the search. And I found a record for Thomas Leah, male Brace. I find his christening date, and I find his father and mother's name, Richard and Elizabeth. So going back to my tree, I can put that information in. Notice how I'm just swapping from birth record to marriage record repeatedly and following this family back in time inside this parish. I may wish to know what Elizabeth's maiden name was, or when Richard and Elizabeth were married. Or I might ask the question the other way. I found Jane and Thomas and Mary. Did Mary have any siblings? Well, using the same principle, I can work down the tree as well. In this case, I'm going to go back. Notice I'm not putting any names up here in the ancestor name field, but I've said show me all of the records where there was a birth from 1790 to 1820. Why? Well, they were married in 1789, I believe, and let's give them a year to start having kids, and they're probably going to have kids for maybe as much as 30 years. I want all the records where there was a birth in that year range, and the father was Thomas, the mother was Jane, and only show me birth records from that parish. And when I do that search, I get back a bunch of siblings. Thomas and Jane are the parents. You can look at these year range and they fit. You can just see which kids were married, are born in succession. And so this is great. Anyway, you can use that batch number to reconstruct families. Now we're going to switch gears from the images. We're going to go into the search system, some of the advanced features in the search, and we're going to filter our results by collection. Why would I want to do this? Well, I've noticed as expert researchers do searches, they don't put in everything they know. They put in a little bit of information about the ancestor, because the more information you put in, the fewer records are going to have all that information on it. In a search system, the more data you put into the form, the less you're going to get back. So they put in a little bit of information, cast a broad net, and then they want to sort through that large set of search results. We added a feature to the search form that allows you to do that, lets you slice and dice your search results and only explore the most meaningful chunks related to your ancestor. Let's take a quick task. I'm going to do a broad search, and I'm going to show you how to explore those results by collection. So let's go do a really broad search. My great-great-grandfather is Isidore Allor. So I said, just go into the 5.6 billion records and show me all the records that have Isidore Allor on them. And it brings back a bunch. There's 2,085. Now, I could go looking through every one of those. I can switch to 75 per page, and I can do next page, and I can spend hours going through all 2,085 results one at a time. But that's pretty tedious. Notice that at the top, we're displaying a Records tab, but next to it is a Collections tab. If I click that Collections tab, rather than seeing all of my 2000 results presented as individual records, it presents my 2000 plus results by collection. I can see the number of results in each one of the collections. I can see how many results are in each type. There's a whole section of birth, marriage, death, a type of census and list. There's a bunch of immigration and naturalization. Notice that we show you the top 5 collections based on the number of results. But if I want to see all of the birth, marriage, and death collections, there's 108 of them, and by clicking on this, it would open or expand that section. Notice also that on the side, I can multi-select collections of interest. I happen to know that my great-great-grandfather Isidore never went to England, so the England and Wales or California birth index would be completely irrelevant. He spent his whole life in Michigan. I may only be looking for census records, so by selecting the US censuses, I can ignore all of the things from New Zealand and England and California that I know do not pertain to my ancestor, and drill down just on the collections that are of interest to me. Once I've selected the ones I want, I click Filter these results, and I'm taken to the same set of search results, but now it's filtered down just to the results from those 4 collections that I selected. I'm going to go through here, and I'm going to try and find my great-great-grandfather in the 1920 census, the 1910, the 1930, the 1940, and when I find him in the 1920, for instance, or the 1930, I can click the little X box next to the collection, and it will eliminate that collection from my set of results, so I can keep narrowing down even within my filtered result set, only looking at the ones that I still need to look at. When I'm done, I can click back on the Collection tab, go back to that list of collections, choose a different set of collections, and jump into it again. So I can cast a broad net and get a whole bunch of results back, but I can then slice and dice it by clicking and selecting just the collections that are of interest to me and analyzing my results set in the most meaningful chunks. That's filtering your result set by collection. Let's do something different. Let's talk about exact searching. Sometimes you are looking for a very specific record. You really don't want anything except records that have the data exactly the way you typed it. By using the exact tools, which are these checkboxes at the end of the search form that will match what you type in exactly, you reduce the variability in your search results. It's going to hide records where the data on the record is not exactly what you type in. There are a couple ways that we match records. If I type in Frank, an exact match to Frank is just exactly what I typed in. It's going to score the highest. It'll have the highest overall contribution to the score for that record. Our system is smart enough, however, to know about name variants and misspellings and translations of names. So if I don't check the exact box and I type in Frank, the system may bring back records with the name of Frankie, Franklin, Francisco, and others that match what I typed in closely, but not exactly. We also have the concept of match on missing. If I put in a bunch of parameters, data to search on, and the system finds a record that matches my other parameters, but there's no first name at all on the record, it may still bring back that record as being relevant to my search, but it doesn't contain all of the things I typed in. When we bring back a record that is matched on missing data, meaning the thing you typed in isn't present on the record, it actually reduces the overall score slightly. We will not bring back anything that conflicts with what you typed in, but we may bring back records that don't have every parameter that you typed in. Those will be scored lower. They'll be down lower on the search results. What do I mean when we say exact? The search text that you type in will be matched exactly with the following 4 exceptions. When you check the exact box, the search system ignores diacritics. It's going to treat pena and peña as exactly the same word. It's going to ignore spaces. So De La Vega with spaces is exactly the same as far as the search system is concerned as De La Vega without spaces. It's going to ignore capitalization. McDonald with a capital D is the same as McDonald with a lowercase d. And lastly, it's going to ignore punctuation. My family name O'Brien is found with and without apostrophes. The reason we ignore these four things is because we have some inside knowledge about how records have been curated over the years, the various software tools that were used to capture these, and we know that sometimes those tools didn't allow punctuation and diacritics, etc. So by ignoring those four things, we believe we can get you the most meaningful set of records even when you type exact. Now, let's do a quick search. I've said I want to look for Isidore Allor. I've restricted by location, only give me records that are from the state of Michigan. And I've restricted by type, only show me records of type census. When I click notice that I did not check the exact box on Isidore. When I do that search, I get back 5 results, and looking at them, you can see that I have Isidore without an E. I think down in there somewhere, if I do some searching, I'd find an Idador. I've got all kinds of name variants because I did not choose exact. Now let's go back. I'm going to do the exact same search, but notice that I checked the exact box. So when I do that, I'm only going to get 2 results, and those results are spelled exactly the way I typed it in. There's a word of caution here. Only use exact carefully. It will reduce the variability. It's going to hide data that isn't exactly what you specified. Fewer results will be returned, and those Isidores and Idadors and Isidores without an E, those actually were my great-great-grandfather. So use it cautiously and use it wisely to get down just to the records that you're looking for. Let's talk about the opposite. Let's talk about searching with wildcards. This is the opposite of exact searching in that it's going to increase the variability of your search results. You want to introduce more variability into your search results to find difficult to find records like misindexed records, etc. I'm going to do the task of finding the 1900 census for a gentleman named Timothy Sullen Speaks. If I go to Timothy's page, I can see his family. His wife was Orleana, Virginia. He had a number of children. He was born in 1847 and married in Tennessee. Died in 1936. So I get a picture of Timothy's life. I'm going to go do a search for him. I put a couple years around his birth year of 1847, a couple years in front and in back, just to pick up records that may have the wrong date on it. I put in Timothy Sullen Speaks. I said I only want records from the United States and I only want records of type census. So I do that search. It brings back a bunch of census records, and as I look at those, I can see the 1850, the 1860, 70, 80, not a 1900. I see the 1910 and the 1920. So I found a bunch of records. That's a great search system. They can do one search and bring back right there at the top a bunch of records for one person like that, but it's missing the 1900. But I'm wise. I know that I have a collections tab up here at the top. And so rather than look through all 90 results, I'm just going to click the collections tab. And when I do that, I'm presented with a list of the collections, and I see that there's 3 results from the 1900 census. So I'm going to assume that maybe Timothy's 1900 census record was down lower in my search results. I'm going to click that census. It brings me over. It shows me the 3 records, and in looking them over, I can see right off none of them are my Timothy Sullen Speaks. The family names aren't right. Nothing's right about them. So I'm at an impasse. I can't find his 1900 record, but I know about Wildcards, and I'm going to assume that maybe his name was misindexed. Now there's 2 kinds of wildcards that I can use. The first is the asterisk, or the star character. And wherever I insert that star into my search string, the system will replace that with 0 to an infinite number of ambiguous characters. For instance, if I insert Stan with a star at the end, it'll bring back records where it replaced that star with 0 ambiguous characters. Or it'll bring back Stanislaw, where it replaced that star with 5 ambiguous characters. You can use multiple wildcards in a search string. I have a colleague of mine whose family name is Chaluzniak, and he's found that if he inserts a star LUS star K, the system will bring back all of the name variants of Chaluzniak, which are many. It'll replace those star characters with all kinds of different characters, but it'll bring back many records from his family. The second kind of wildcard is the question mark. And it'll replace one and only one. It won't replace 0, it won't replace an infinite number of characters, but wherever you put a question mark in, it'll put any ambiguous character in that spot. It'll bring back Elizabeth with an S or with a Z. So let's go do that. I've taken his search and I've replaced some of the characters in his last name with star characters. Now, how do I know where to put them? Well, you have to kind of use your reasoning on this. Which are the characters in your family name most likely to be misindexed or mistranscribed? And I know that vowels are often messed up. E's and A's often look the same. I just took some guesses using my experience and put some star characters in replacing some of the characters in the name. In this case, I used 2 of them. When I do that search, it brings back a bunch of records, and notice that it brought back this Timothy Sipilak. Well, right off, I probably would say that's not him, except there's his wife, Orleana V. Orleana is a kind of unique name, and some of the kids' names match. This actually is his record, born in 1847, just as I knew. So when I look at that, take a look at that image by clicking the camera icon, I can see what's going on here. I have some bleed through maybe from the other side. I notice that the census taker writes his P's a little odd with a detached circle. You can see that up here in the word stepson. There's some other bleed through or superfluous characters up in here, and I really can't fault the indexer for making a mistake and not seeing speak here and seeing Sipilak. That's a very difficult handwriting to correctly decipher. But using wildcards, I was able to find this record. If I take a look at the record details, I can see the whole family there, and that is his record. So I'm going to go ahead and attach that to the family tree. I'm going to add some notes to it indicating that the name is misindexed and that the last name really should be Speak, so that no one goes and messes up the family tree. But using wildcards, I was able to find a very difficult to identify record. Okay, moving forward, let's analyze results in a spreadsheet. This is a really advanced feature, and we noticed that users often want to do things with their search results set that we can't easily support on the website. They want to go through each search result and maybe tag them as being of interest or not, a yes, no, maybe. They want to sort the search results in all different kinds of ways and do various advanced analyses on them. Rather than try and build all that into the website, we allow the users to export the set of search results into a spreadsheet, and that's done like this. I'm going to do a very broad search just to get a bunch of records back. I said show me all of the records where the surname is Allor and the birthplace was St. Clair, Michigan in a 20-year time range. I only want records from the United States and Michigan, and it's a pretty broad search. All the Allors from St. Clair are probably my family, so I get 472 of these records. I can do 75 per page. And if I'm logged in, this is a feature that's only available if you're logged into FamilySearch, but if I'm logged in, I will see this button over here at the top of my search results on the right-hand side that lets me export my search results into a spreadsheet. If I click that button, it's going to pop up a dialog. It'll let me give that file a name. It'll save it out to my hard drive, and opening up that file in my favorite spreadsheet program will show me all the data that was on those records. It'll have the score, the full name, the gender, birth date. In fact, these data columns keep going out to the right because we break each piece of data out into its separate column. At the top, I have the search string. People often come and say, hey, I did search yesterday, I came back and did it today, I got all different kind of results. And the answer is, well, yes, we publish new records every day, but it's very likely if you didn't get pretty close to the same results, you did a different kind of search. So we gave you a link to keep the searches identical. We also tell you when you did it. So you can do a search today, come back in a couple months, do the new search, take the two files, subtract them from each other in Excel, for instance, and find just the new stuff that's been published. There's all kinds of cool analyses like that that you can do. Anyway, people often ask, why did you dump it out in the XLS or Excel file format? And the answer is because almost every spreadsheet application in the world will open up Excel files. We're not shilling for Microsoft, but it's a very common spreadsheet format that everybody can open up. Okay. Now, that ends the presentation. We've gone through, we've looked at how to use image sets, the waypoints, the indices that are either in the images or not in the images, how to use the catalog to find them, and various advanced search features like wildcards and exact searching and filtering the results set, etc. If you have any feedback that you would like to provide to FamilySearch about our search systems, go to the getsatisfaction.com/FamilySearch forums. There's a whole bunch of users on there who can answer questions. They do a fabulous job at that. The product managers at FamilySearch frequent this forum as well, and we answer questions, we provide information, or we take problems back into our engineering teams to resolve them. So if you have any feedback for us, it's getsatisfaction.com/FamilySearch. Put that on there, and that would be tremendously helpful. One last piece of counsel is when you give us that feedback, make sure you provide the URLs from the top of your search results or from the top of the record details so that we can more easily create the exact problem that you're seeing and help replicate it, triage it, and resolve it. Thank you for listening to the presentation. I hope it's useful to you, and happy searching.